Good evening, everyone. Hello, Kevin. Hello, Andrew, Catalina, Ryan, Cam, and Jens. Welcome, all of you, for joining in for the evening. So happy to see all of you checking in. Scott, hello, Scott. Good to see you too. So happy to have all of you joining us this evening. So this evening we'll be once again doing our program of guided meditation, followed by a Dhamma talk and Q&A. And this evening the program is being led by Ayyā Somā, our resident robed magnificent human being. So we're all delighted. Hello, Yuri Tsai. Hello to you too. We're all delighted that Ayyā Somā is sharing Dhamma this evening. So without anything more from me at this time, let's all give her our full attention. So please, Ayyā Somā, if you'd like to lead us.
Thank you, Bangten, and thank you all for joining us. So we can start with a little meditation as usual. So we can take the time to adjust our position and come into a comfortable sitting position for meditation. Maybe do a few stretches to balance our body. We can close our eyes, or we can keep them slightly open if we feel a little bit tired at the end of the day. And take a few moments just to scan the body to see if there are any points in the body that are full of tension. And if there are, we can relax them. So we can relax our forehead, our jaw, we can relax our neck, our shoulders, we can relax our arms, our belly, our legs. And we can relax our breath. Taking a few moments to tune in with our breath, with every in-breath and out-breath. And generating the wish for ourselves to be happy. Trying to really mean it. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. Remembering to put a smile on your face, even if it doesn't come naturally. Fake it till you make it. And really try to wish for yourself to be happy. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. Showering ourselves with as much loving kindness as we can generate. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. Expanding this warm wish of loving kindness to all the people who are meditating with us in the room, whether they're human or non-human, and all the people, whether they're human or non-human, that are meditating with us on the other side of the screen. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be safe. Really trying to strengthen our loving kindness at every word, bringing it from a simmering point to a boiling point. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be safe. Probably meant that to include all the healthcare workers and all the people who are working outside of their homes to help people in this time of crisis. All the people who work in grocery stores, in the pharmacies, the cleaners, so many different people who are out there helping us through these times. May they be happy, may they be healthy, may they be safe. May they be happy, may they be healthy, may they be safe. Sending metta to all the people battling the virus, whether they're in the hospital, whether they're at their own homes, and to their loved ones, and to all the people, including ourselves, who are staying at home for the benefit of themselves and others. May we all be happy. May we all be safe. May we all be healthy. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we be safe. May we all be free from suffering.
Thank you, Ayya, for the lovely meditation. And welcome to Claudia, Richard, and Melinda. Good to see you joining in as well. So at this time, Ayyā Somā is planning to speak a bit about the 3 characteristics. So we can learn a bit more about this central topic in Buddhist thought. So let's all give her our full attention. And again, if you have any questions, you can type them in at any time and she will answer them at the end of the talk. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Bhante. I'm rejoicing in metta. Such a better state of being than the mind state I was in exactly before doing metta meditation. So it's such a great opportunity for myself and for all of you. I invite you to just take a few moments to look at the state of the mind and really see the difference of what generating wholesome mind states makes in our experience. So in Buddhism, we all know we like to talk a lot about, the 3 characteristics all the time, in particular suffering. At Buddhist Insights, we like to talk a lot about impermanence and also non-self. In fact, we just had a talk led by Dante on the latter subject matter last night. So what are these 3 characteristics? A lot of time, there are so many books and so many Dharma talks and so much information that you can find online in libraries. So much information. But I feel like most of the time we absorb it and intellectually, and it makes sense, and we agree with it, which is why we, make the commitment to follow the path to one degree or another. But there is clearly that fundamental delusion in our experience that impedes us from fully realizing, especially what suffering and what impermanence means, um, let alone non-self. And in this time of extreme world uh, suffering, then it's something that we can't ignore. It's very difficult to ignore. Um, Also, the impermanence is very difficult to ignore. It's kind of like a big slap in our face, where we see immediately the fragility of our experience, the fragility of our existence, the fragility of everything that we take for granted on a day-to-day basis, but also the extent of our delusion if we um, really take the opportunity to take a deeper look. We were just talking today here at the monastery about Sandy. So I spent Hurricane Sandy in 2012. I spent uh, quite some time in the Rockaways right after Sandy, engaged in relief work with other volunteers, and there was so much suffering back then, and it seems, even though right now I'm not in amidst, like in the middle of Manhattan. We're a little bit remote physically. Mentally, it's like the same experience of back then, with though the support of the practice. But at the same time, what really struck me today was how in these days my mind is really going, really understanding what the priorities in life are on an experiential level, no different than how my mind was going back to the sort of primordial things that mattered in 2012, even though I didn't have the support of the Dhamma. But the things that mattered back then, just like today, were really apparent. And all the unnecessary things were also really apparent. So very easy to discard, very, very much, I don't need this right now. This is not important. What is important right now? The human life is important. Precious human life is important. So the major difference between that moment and this moment is that moment, this realization was very much confused. This realization today has come with an awareness of having that realization, if it makes any sense. But fundamentally, also the realization that there has been this gap in the two moments where I've taken for granted this precious human life to one degree or another. I've taken for granted all the little things that make our experience, make our life possible every single day. So there is that sort of quality of forgetfulness in our experience, a forgetfulness of the realizations that we have when we are truly experiencing suffering, which is basically the product of not fully understanding impermanence. So we have this idea, yes, of course, everything is impermanent. But if we truly understood that everything is impermanent, we wouldn't be shocked that right now we're experiencing what we're experiencing. We probably wouldn't even have this problem to begin with. when you also see how pretty much not only this government, we like to focus on, whatever kind of government we're experiencing in whatever country. Since I'm not from this country, I've lived in a few countries, and I've seen how my mind always went to pretty much hating whatever kind of political power was in charge and what kind of decisions they were making. So, in one shape or form, you kind of realize that the tendency is somewhat the same. People were not prepared here in the United States. People were not prepared in the UK. People were not prepared in Italy. People were not prepared in China. Like it's really interesting how, even though causes and conditions kind of shifted, both people who were making decisions on the governmental level and also the people who were experiencing those conditions, we were all kind of like, yeah, it's happening to someone else. It's not really going to happen to me. This condition is not really going to be that serious. Or if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in the future. In the future. So there is that fundamental quality of delusion that pervades the human experience no matter what. And even when we encounter the Dharma, we're still bound to fall into it over and over again and close ourselves, pretend that the suffering is not there until like we can't avoid seeing it because it slaps us really hard in the face. It takes thousands of people to die in order for us to actually really understand that there is a problem. How sad is that? How terrible is that? So I'm getting a little bit pessimistic, maybe. So I'd like to also maybe be a little bit optimistic, perhaps, or I'll try. Maybe I'll try to regenerate the metta that we had practiced beforehand. And the good news is that whenever we're experiencing, when we're having these realizations, it's very good, very important to really take the opportunity to deepen our actual practical understanding of the Dhamma, to really start treasuring our human life, really start treasuring every single moment of our life, and really trying to deepen this understanding of the three characteristics and of the Four Noble Truths and of the Dhamma fundamentally, and taking a moment to kind of take this opportunity to spur some motivation to dispel bad habits. So when we actually look at our mind, we have to also be honest with ourselves. And what are we doing right now? How are we reacting towards this situation? Are we generating wholesome mind states? Are we generating unwholesome mind states? And if this is the last breath that we're going to take right now, tonight, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, what do we want our last breath to feel like? Do we want it to be with a mind of loving kindness like it was 10, 15 minutes ago? Imbued with really wholesome wishes for the whole world? Or do we want it to be unwholesome, right? Uncultivated? And also taking a sort of consideration. I mean, if you're just a little bit like me, you probably had a bunch of different emotional states within this pandemic, ranging from frustration to anger to depression to disappointment to a whole like spectrum of all um, different different unwholesome states. And no, it's very important to understand how we suffer. So it's also important not to repress them, as we, I think, discussed last time. But it's also important to acknowledge them as what they are, which is unwholesome and a big waste of time. And that becomes apparent that it's a big waste of time when we think, wow, this can be the last moment. It's real, like it's like a serious possibility. Each person right now, including myself, could actually be, could really have, could be sick right now and could lose, could die at any moment. Very important to recollect this and think, what kind of mind do I want to cultivate? So realizing how these emotions, um, the unwholesome emotions that we generate, are obstructions towards our happiness, are producing even more suffering, and how they impede also um, wholesome actions. They cloud our experience instead of clarifying our experience. So instead of dispelling delusion, we throw even more cloudiness, even more sort of dust. We make it even more um, hard to navigate our experience for ourselves. So instead, what we can do, and we at least that was my experience after doing loving kindness meditation, ah, really treasuring that bright, loving mind and channeling it towards actions through body, speech, and mind, um, towards love, towards caring for others. And the question is that a better state? If that would be the last state that my mind would be in? I think so. Definitely more useful, definitely more caring. Would we want to be next to a person who's full of hatred, full of unwholesome mind states? Or would we rather be next to someone who is caring, kind, and looking after us? So that's when we start thinking, instead of like, I am right to be experiencing this, we start flipping our experience and thinking, how can be of how can I be of benefit to other beings? What is the appropriate response here? What is beneficial? What is wholesome? And I feel like in this way, when we start really contemplating our experience, then we start cultivating really a true understanding of suffering and of impermanence, of how in every single moment everything changes, and also of what suffering really is and how we're experiencing it, and also how it can change. How can there be a sort of flip side to it? So the Buddha never said life is suffering. The Buddha said there is suffering. So let's always remind ourselves of that. There is suffering. Hence, there's also the end of suffering. But it's really interesting because whenever we're experiencing a lot of different emotions, there's obviously the reason why it's so difficult to kind of get over ourselves and get over our emotions is first and foremost the identification with them. So it's very difficult whenever we're experiencing anger, whatever we're experiencing sadness, whatever we're experiencing depression, to think that it's someone else that is experiencing it, right? They kind of suck us in. But um, because it's actually kind of interesting. In Italy, we have this book called the I Promessi Sposi. I don't know how you say it in English, how it was translated, but we have to study it in high school. It's like a compulsory thing for all Italians. It's a big, big book, and it's Alessandro Manzoni is the writer, and it's all about. It's a novel that actually takes lots of elements um, from the time of the bubonic plague. So how do you say it? Tonight I can't speak English. The story is happening during the bubonic plague in the north of Italy. It's kind of interesting because actually that was no different than today. That's when today, like the whole coronavirus really took. That's where the culprit was, like the biggest, where it still is actually, in the northern part of Italy, in the region of Lombardia. And back in the bubonic plague, it was exactly the same area. So it's a really interesting coincidence. So, and anyway, so this story is all based during that time in the Middle Ages. And there's a huge emphasis on all the different sort of individuals. There's a priest, there's like a noble person, there's like lots of poor people, etc., etc. And there's a big emphasis on outlining all the different psychologies going on and all the different reactions of all the different people, and of the rich people trying to like get into safety by throwing all the poor, dispensable people under the bus. But then eventually everybody, the bubonic plague didn't, as we say in Italian, didn't look in the face of anyone. Like it doesn't matter whether you're rich, poor, from this class or the other class. We're all the same in the face of death. So it was really interesting because while I've been going through a lot of different emotions in the past couple of days, at the same time, I have this kind of like background story of I Promessi Sposi, of this book, kind of like on the back of my head. And I was like, it's really surreal. I'm kind of living this book, but in the United States. It's like a sort of dystopian kind of characterized screenplay of the same exact story that happened back then. And there were different protagonists acting in the same way. And then I'm also one of the protagonists because there are also religious people involved in it. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, instead of being the Catholic priest, I'm like the Buddhist monk. So there's such a, it was, I would have these moments of like, huh, oh, that's bizarre. But it's so interesting because then it put kind of everything in perspective in the way that we think that our experience is so unique, that our mind states are so unique, but we just need to pick a classic book, which is a classic because it's a classic. It's like a, human defilements since eons, since forever. In no matter what part of the world, like it's always the sort of same flavor of greed, hatred, and delusion wrapped up um, into, a different kind of like different wrapping, wrapped up in a different wrapping. My English is excellent tonight. So that's when we start a little bit understanding, or not understanding, but having a glimpse. You're kind of like, how is it possible that my experience that I perceive as so unique has been kind of repeated over and over again, just in the history that I've learned in high school, let alone if I actually did, a whole master in history. I'm probably sure there would be even more material to look into. And overlooking even the history that hasn't been transcribed. So you start kind of thinking, so what is my experience based on? Where are my emotions coming from? Where are my thoughts coming from? Where is all of this based from? And I remember, this is probably why I'm wearing this outfit these days, and why I got into this path. It's been a question that I always had, since very young, since I can remember. I was always curious, trying to understand why I was having the experience that I was having of reality. Remember, the first thing that really caught my interest was actually not Buddhism, because I didn't have the good karma to find it until later, but rather, actually, if I remember, the sort of Marxist theory um, of the base and superstructure, I think they're called in English. So the base being the sort of economical system of a nation, like the production where all the production happens, and the superstructure being the whole, all the arts, culture, morality, religion, etc. All of that is the fabric of one particular nation or society. And I remember I was like quite young, and I remember reading all of this and thinking, oh, it's quite interesting. I want to deconstruct my superstructure. I want to understand why I think these thoughts, why I have certain preferences, what is actually coming from my parents, what is coming from the society I grew up with, what is coming from the nation I grew up with, what is nurture, what is nature. So I've been going on this like constant quest of trying to really find sort of my true self. And it was so very difficult to actually find. I mean, I managed to shed a lot of preconceived ideas that I had, but very difficult to find this true self until I found Buddhism, and they told me, well, that's because you don't have one. And I was like, oh, well, that's an interesting idea. And, that made huge impact on my mind. And I actually like started thinking, oh, well, that makes sense. When you start connecting the dots of your experience and you're like, okay, there's obviously a sense of continuation since I was a child until now, kind of what I can remember. There's also, at least in my experience, such a radical transformation from state of beings to the point that sometimes I feel like I have memories of an entirely different person. And sometimes I, in fact, looked radically different from the way I do today. When I was 6 years old, I looked radically different than today. Let's not even talk about when I was 6 months old, 3 years old. Very, very different. And I have like glimpses, not of when I was 3 months old, but definitely when I was 3, 4, 5, and all the ideas and kind of personality quirks that I had. And I'm like, oh, so bizarre that I was ever that person, or even the person before ordination. I remember that. And I'm like, oh, how weird that I was ever even not a Buddhist monastic. What a bizarre lifestyle. What bizarre thoughts I had. What bizarre likes and dislikes I had. So it all never really made quite sense until finding these teachings and also practicing with them. And practicing both in sitting meditation. There are some really delicious practices that, especially they do in Mahayana. I love them. On trying to quote unquote find, um, who you think you are, what you think the mind is, what color you think the mind is, where is the mind located. I still remember when I was asked the question during meditation, is the mind inside or outside of you? And I remember thinking, oh, wow, it never occurred to me that the mind could be outside of me, of my body. Oh, what a bizarre assumption. Like, why had I never even thought that the mind could be here instead of here? So I always had this. It's also interesting when I realized that actually the majority of people of Asian descent, when you ask them where the mind is, they point the heart. So that was the first realization, actually. I was like, oh, why do I think that my mind is here? And why did I never think that the mind could possibly be out there? Where are all these preconceived ideas coming from? So then we start realizing that our idea of self is just a bunch of layered up um, ideas, thoughts. It's inconsistent. It's just not something really based on anything solid. I would have probably, I think that my assumption that my mind was here, I would have thought, I think I had the idea that it was very scientific, actually. And to a degree to one degree or another, probably it comes from, the emphasis in my culture that there is on the brain and the sort of idea that we kind of use them a lot of times as synonyms, while in reality there is actually no science that says that the mind is the brain, at least as far as I know, or any proof. There are assumptions even there, or suggestions, but there is not any kind of proof of what consciousness actually really is. So anyway, I'm kind of like going rounds and bats. So maybe I'll stop here and see if you have any questions or thoughts. You can also say shut up. It's also okay.
Thank you, Ayya, for your words. And a few more people have checked in. So hello, Marielle, Junie, Ryan, Gouache. Thank you all for joining us. So again, at this time, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. And I'll read them out for Ayyā Somā to answer. So Marielle has a comment. She says, it's very interesting because I experienced something similar in life, trying to deconstruct my reality. And I ended up studying something that does that and ended up connecting to a spiritual path that does the same.
What is it that she's studying? I'm very curious.
Well, we'll see if she answers.
And I think she's a creative person. I think she's an artist, if I remember correctly, right, Marielle?
And Yudi Tsai says, some scientists are starting to doubt whether the mind is in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Ryan is asking, do you see similarities between the Marxist idea of how the self is constructed and the Buddhist ideas of self or not self?
Well, I'll put a, how do you say, disclaimer, I'm not an expert Marxist. It was just a philosophy that I found interesting for probably a couple of months when I was in high school. And then I jumped to the next thing. But that concept in particular really stuck into my mind. See, I tend to keep on still doing that. Such a strong habit. Yeah, it got stuck into the mind. So I would say there are some, I think he kind of like veered towards that direction, but at the same time also missed the point, which, once again, I'm not an expert of Marxist philosophy theory, or there are other people who should work a lot more educated than I am on the subject. So I think where he kind of missed the point was sort of equating human happiness to material goods. So once you have all your needs satisfied, then you're happy. Well, actually, the Buddhist perspective is quite the opposite. You need very few material needs satisfied. Well, not even satisfied, barely satisfied, in order to find unconditional happiness. So I would say that it's not necessarily similar, but it gives you the idea of self and non-self. My experience is not that it's similar, but it kind of gives you a glimpse of what we think that the self is. So that's what was useful for me before my Buddhist practice. I found that very interesting to kind of get a pointer, like a sort of, oh, check this out. Actually, you think you have all these like beautiful thoughts, and you have all these ugly thoughts too. Where are they coming from? And sometimes a lot of beliefs and a lot of ideas, not sometimes, most of the time, actually come from your environment. It's just that you're not protecting your mind. You're not looking even at your mind. So you don't understand that whatever is around you is pervading your concepts and ideas. So actually I had this a really strong experience of that when I was in Thailand recently. I don't know if I want to go in that direction, but anyway, long story short, Bante's laughing because he knows what. But anyway, there was a lot of being a female monastic in Thailand had proven to be, has been very challenging for me in February when I visited. And I have to say that because I was treated in a certain way for like 2 weeks, then I started noticing how my mind was absorbing a lot of concepts that were coming from the outside. And I was generating these thoughts that were shaping my sense of self-worth, and also how I was acting and relating to other people. And it was really interesting. Well, it created a lot of suffering, but aside from the suffering, it was very interesting to me to really realize how a lot of the times I think that the thoughts that I'm producing, or that the ideas that I have of myself, like my sort of sense of self-worth, are things that I cultivate myself. And there is a bit of that too, but mostly actually it also comes from my immediate environment, which is also connected with why then it made really a lot of sense when the Buddha said Kalyanamita is not half of the path, but it's the entire path. So having spiritual friends is the entire path, because you can see how permeable our minds are whenever we are in a particular situation, whenever we are surrounded by certain people, whenever we read certain material. Actually, I was doing a while back, a few years ago, I started doing this test of my mind of reading this kind of newspaper online that is not exactly it's affiliated to a political party that I don't agree with, and that I always thought it was really bizarre that people who were affiliated with that political party could, even think certain thoughts. So then I kind of did this test on my mind, and I started reading this thing over and over again, kind of religiously every day. And I started noticing how my mind was starting to shift closer and closer to the beliefs that were held within that party. What was helpful to me was actually to understand where and how they were shaping their ideas. But at the same time, it was also very interesting to see how if we're not careful with what we introduce with our thoughts, we can easily shift our morality. We can easily shift all our value judgments. We can shift so many different things very quickly. And that's why, in my opinion, the Buddha puts so much importance on mindfulness, but not just mindfulness in left, right, sitting, eating, whatever. But but rather like every single thing that is appearing also in the mind. Like, what is our experience when we're not meditating? Like being mindful in every moment of every single thing, like no different than when we're eating, like going, okay, this is a chickpea and this is whatever broth, and this is like every single ingredient that we're introducing in our body. We apply the same thing with the thoughts and behaviors and things that are coming from externally, and understanding how they're affecting our mind, and then altering our external situation as much as possible in order to make it the best, the most ideal place to practice Dharma. So that's what I realized. I was like, I really need to be in a place where I am capable of practicing the Buddhist teachings in the most wholesome way possible, away from a lot of different ideas or concepts that are thrown onto my mind that become obstacles that I start internalizing and creating new personas, if that makes sense. So I don't know if I answered your question. Tonight I'm just going bit stream of consciousness around in circles, a little tired. But I hope that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Ayya. And a couple more people checking in. Hello, Yulia. Hello, Suzanne. Happy to see you joining us this evening. Marielle says, I'm an artist of the social sciences. Haha. I studied global studies and sociology with a minor in ethnicity. Ned asks, Dear Ayya, when contemplating the three characteristics, it seems that we are still in the realm of conceptual thinking. How do we get to experience these characteristics directly?
Well, look more closely. You're clearly not looking closely. Are you not experiencing any suffering right now? It's a question. Are you not experiencing impermanence? Let's see if he answers.
Ned says yes.
There we go. So that's the problem. A lot of times we get a little bit stuck with lofty words, and we think, that the Dhamma is this kind of like, whatever, fancy words to talk about with our friends to outsmart them. No, the Dharma, the reason why we study the Dharma to begin with is to actually understand what we have to do, how we practice. And the Dharma is extremely relevant in every single moment of our life. So the three characteristics, it's not like, oh, and now I learned the Pali words, dukkha, anicca, anatta, and I learned how to spell them properly. And, no. No, what we have to do is really understand, look, what is suffering? How does suffering apply to my life? How am I, where is the dukkha? Both when you're meditating, you go like, where is the dukkha? Sometimes I do that meditation. It's great. Where is it? I can see it. I can feel it. I'm learning from it. Look at it. See it. Where is the dukkha? Impermanence. How is it changing? Inside of me? And how is it changing externally in every second? Right now, if there's this lamp making this noise that changes every second, every even millesimo di secondo. How do you say millisecond?
Yeah.
There's impermanence everywhere. If we can't see it, we're just not paying attention. And once we notice impermanence, when we notice suffering, then we start noticing non-self. And the easiest is to see the body as non-self, at least. That was my experience. But actually, apparently also in the time of the Buddha, because there's this beautiful sutta, I don't remember the name, in the Samyutta Nikaya that I remember. It was basically, when I read it, it was like having a sort of slap in the face from the Buddha, because he's like, yeah, for the uninstructed worldling, it's very easy to see the body as non-self. And I'm like, instructed worldling, to see the body as non-self? I thought I was very proud of my accomplishment. And then he's like, but you can see, the body standing for kind of like in the same way for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, so 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 year, 3 years, 50 years, like whatever it is. But the mind changes every second, millisecond, and every moment is entirely different. The monkey mind, that's why we call it in the monkey mind. So goes from branch to branch, branch to branch, branch to branch, but the uninstructed worldling identifies with that. And I remember thinking, I'm the uninstructed worldling again. Big slap in the face. Even though it's so impermanent, so constantly changing, that it clearly cannot be who we are, it's easier for us to see something that, in comparison, it's relatively permanent as non-self than it is with our thoughts. But that is because we're not looking deeply. We're actually not paying attention. We're willfully ignorant of it. But we start shedding the willful ignorance. But we can only shed it by actually looking at our experience. So you see, when I actually asked you, do you see suffering and impermanence? You're like, yeah, I of course I see it. So then look more closely in sitting meditation, but also outside. Reflect on your experience. Think of it. Remember, I think that's the way to skillfully think of past and future. Think of like, how was my mind, a few days ago, a few weeks ago? How has it shifted? Before the pandemic was even like something that people were talking about, till they started talking about the pandemic. How did your mind take this concept? How did you react when you first heard the news of people dying? I don't know, perhaps in Italy or in China or wherever. How did you think that it would change and shift your experience? Reflect on that. Reflect on all these different stages and reflect on your experience now and see all the causes and conditions. How are they creating the experience that you're currently having? And from there, you get insights on how to also shape your experience moving forward. So as usual, I like to quote Venerable Dreamer, who said, You cannot control the consequences, but you can control the causes. So I think it's interesting to analyze previous causes and the current consequences that we're experiencing as much as we can, obviously, because we have awareness within our limited means, just to understand cause and effect, just to understand causality. And then deepening that experiential causality to understand how, by generating different causes, we can generate different effects.
Thank you. And Junie says, thank you for sharing glimpses of your excellent educational background, Ayya. It is very interesting to hear your viewpoint. Melvin asks, is there a place in the practice for pride, like pride in how far you've come or how much you've changed? Or is that something to be avoided?
I would say that pride is in the category of waste of time. Definitely not a wholesome thing to have. It's just creating a conceit of superiority. But there is definitely a place for reflecting on your own goodness. It's actually a practice that the Buddha encourages a lot. So not in terms of like, oh yeah, like, you know, I'm like the CEO of this company, I'm so cool. Oh, I make like, I don't know how many zeros at the end of like my paycheck. So it's not that. That's not goodness. That's just whatever worldly achievements that the Buddha just talks about, you know, us being there is this sutta that he talks about praising gain. He equiparates it as a dung beetle eating all this feces and being proud of all these feces and going, yeah, I have more feces than you do. Oh, that's great. That's great. So we don't want to be, there's nothing to be proud of in that sense. But there is, on the other hand, there is lots of reasons to be proud of having a kind mind and having done acts of kindness, having a mind full of metta, of mudita, of karuna, of upekkha. Absolutely rejoice in your own goodness. Think about all the acts of kindness that you've done. Think about rejoice in the goodness of your practice tonight. Of, you know, you could have watched some stupid show on TV, but instead you actually decided to practice with other people. Practice meditation, reflect on Dharma. These are all incredible, wholesome things that generate great results for yourself and other. And they don't come from a conceit of superiority, like I am better than everyone. Look at my metta is bigger than yours. But rather it's like, oh, I want to become a better person. May I be free of suffering? May I help others be free of suffering? And that is something that one can be proud of, but in a different way, has a different connotation than being proud of worldly pursuits.
Okay, Yulia says, that's an amazing talk, Ayya. I do see the importance of having spiritual friends and the environment that allows you to follow your path without being pulled into different directions. Thanks again. Junie comments, my problem is that I am perfectly happy with impermanence, or anything, because it is all fascinating and easy to enjoy. Guess I am still too content with samsara.
Are you happy about the plague right now? Honest question. Junie, are you happy about the plague? About the pandemic?
Are we waiting for his answer? Okay.
Yes, we're waiting for his answer.
Okay, no answer. Maybe we should keep going.
Well, I assume that you're not happy with the pandemic. Hence, you're not quite happy.
He says no.
Yeah, not quite happy with impermanence. So we're only happy with impermanence when it's the end of the pandemic, but not happy when it's the beginning of the pandemic. So it's not that we pick and choose. We're like, oh yeah, I really love the impermanence because it always brings positive results. No, actually, impermanence has buy one get the other free. So it's also just like brings pleasant change. There's also awful change. So it's tied up with suffering.
Okay. And thank you, Kevin, for reminding people to support the monastery. And Marielle asks a follow-up on the pride question. She says, can't you have pride of who you are today compared to who you were before? Like, can you be proud of the lessons learned and the wisdom gained?
Well, yes, absolutely. So that is in the realm of becoming a better person. So it's not worldly pursuits, but um, it's about making progress in the Dhamma, if that's what you're referring to. So yes, we should be proud, but not once again in the way of developing a conceit of superiority, which can happen a lot of times. You'll see it also in spiritual practitioners. It's like the easiest thing to fall into. Like, oh yeah, so developed, so well developed. Oh yes, not like oh, those people. Oh, that never meditated. Oh, terrible people. They can't even stay equanimous for 1 second, let alone 30 minutes. So yeah, that's not something wholesome to rejoice in. Actually, we all do to one degree or of another. So we also have to be honest with ourselves when we do that. We go, okay, well, that's unwholesome too. I'm generating unwholesome things. There's nothing to be proud about that. But there's definitely pride in generating, like becoming more like the Buddha, an incredible being free of greed, hatred, and delusion. Yes, absolutely. Incredible. Full of a mind full of compassion. Wow. Yes. Give me some of that. So the closer we are to that, then we rejoice in our own goodness and we rejoice in our own accomplishments. So I guess it's not that pride is bad in and of itself. It depends what your definition of pride is, first of all, and two, where you're applying the pride in.
Okay, so Junie says, Ayya, you are right. Melvin Horton laughed during your description of the person proud of their attainments and said, then you should be proud of yourself.
Oh, sad.
So it's getting to almost 9 o'clock. So if there's no more questions, then we can move towards closing for the evening. So thank you all for joining in. It's been really lovely that you keep plugging into our programs. And please keep joining in. So every 8 a.m. and every 7:30 p.m. we'll continue having these sessions. So please keep on joining in every day and continue with your practice between the sessions as well. And may you all be happy, healthy, and safe.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.